Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who I think can help all of us get over our humps even faster. Andy Molinsky was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, where as a kid he loved sports, playing and watching, cooking, and hanging out with friends. He went to college at Brown University, where he majored in international relations and went abroad to Spain during his junior year, which was a life-altering experience that opened his eyes to cultural differences and cultural adaptation, a topic he's been fascinated with ever since. Following college, he went off to Columbia University in New York City for a master's degree in international business, and as part of his studies, decided to go abroad again, this time to work in France for a French consulting firm where he continued being fascinated by culture, cultural adaptation, and the challenges of stepping outside your comfort zone. In fact, he was so interested in these topics that instead of taking a job following his master's degree, he decided to pursue a PhD and academic career in this subject, which he did at Harvard University Joint PhD program in organizational behavior and psychology, which was a great experience and solidified his interest in an academic career. Andy's first job was as an assistant business school professor at the University of Southern California in LA, and then after 2 years living by the beach and enjoying yoga, sushi, and tacos, he decided the weather in LA was way too nice, so he decided to move back to Boston, where he's been ever since, as a professor of organizational behavior and psychology at Brandeis University. Andy loves doing research and also writing, speaking, consulting, training, and coaching people about stretching outside your comfort zone at work and in life, and adapting behavior across cultural boundaries. He's proud to be a writer at Harvard Business Review, Inc., and Psychology Today, and also author of 2 books, Global Dexterity and Reach. Andy and his wife Jen live in the greater Boston area. They have 2 kids and a mischievous mini labradoodle who sits by his feet while he writes. Andy Molinsky, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Sure am. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm glad you're here today. Now, I've given our listeners a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Sure. My current passion, which is super current, in fact, I was working on it this morning, is I'm creating online courses, online training based on my book. So that's sort of a new world for me. And it's so exciting to be able to hopefully reach people, around the country, around the world even, by offering them some training about how to step outside their comfort zone and how to adapt behavior across cultures. So it's super creative, super fun. And I think that there's a real potential to help a really wide group of people. So that's my current passion.
Well, I think, you this particular issue that you're talking about, and one of the things that really stood out to me in the book was when you talked about our need to have the ability to be skillful in reinvention on the fly. Why?
Well, it's a good question. And I mean, I wouldn't say that everyone needs to reinvent themselves all the time in every situation. I think it would probably go crazy unless you're like a junkie for adrenaline. But I think for a lot of us, we often hit those pivot points in our lives. When you're much younger, you're moving from high school to college, which is a major step outside your comfort zone. Maybe you're moving away for the first time. And then when you leave college and you go to work, that's a massive transition. The world of sort of the structured, insular world of college to the quote unquote real world of work. And then maybe you become a manager at some point, or maybe you start your own business, or you become a leader, or whatever it might be. And frankly, even in your personal life, you maybe you get married, maybe you have kids. Those are huge inflection points, huge pivot points. And those are points where you're naturally going to have to step outside your comfort zone to realize your goals, to achieve what you want to achieve, to be happy and to be successful. And so that's what my work's about. That's what the book's about. Teaching people, giving them the skills, the courage, the insights to step outside their comfort zone successfully.
Well, and you talk about the need because of, we have this just rapidly changing business environment, as well as, you could say life environment. People talked about, the anniversary of the smartphone being 10 years, but it seems like from a hectic life perspective that it just continues to increase as the memory in those smartphones continue to grow.
It's true. I mean, it's true. In our companies, the competitive landscape is changing all the time. I was actually giving a talk, did a keynote talk a couple of months ago at a company, and it was really interesting because the CEO, he features stepping outside your comfort zone as a key aspect of his organizational culture, because he believes that literally the job titles that his key people are going to have now are not going to be the same. Those job titles won't exist in 2 or 3 years. That's what he told me. And so he really cares about his people. He wants to develop them. And so what he needs to do is he needs to train them and teach them and sensitize them and put it in their DNA to step outside their comfort zones. That's why he brought me in. But I think it's really sort of emblematic of what's happening in a lot of companies.
That's a really good point. As you were talking, I started thinking about a lot of different things associated with an organization's fear of losing their top talent. And, so one of the things that would come to mind from a senior level executive perspective, that is, if I create that type of culture and people become skilled at the ability to adapt quickly, is that they're going to become more attracted to other organizations. I might lose them. So how do you get an executive over that hump?
It's true. I think that I don't think that I think that is a legitimate fear. But think of the alternative. If you don't cultivate and create a culture of learning and development, and a culture where people are taught to step outside their comfort zone, and that's embraced, and that people are given sort of stretch opportunities at work, and so on and so forth, and you create really that dynamic culture. Imagine if you don't do that. Of course, the downside of doing that is that you might then sort of develop and create these fantastic professionals that will have lots of opportunities elsewhere. But then the downside is, if you don't create that, your company is going to die. You're going to lose people anyways, but for different reasons. So it's better to lose them, I think, for having a fantastic, stimulating, learning-oriented culture. And if that's the cost of it, that you lose a few top people, I think a lot of CEOs and executives would be willing to live with that.
It's interesting that you say that. As you said that, I started thinking about, you talked about sport and being, interested in sport, playing and watching as a kid. And I'm sure that's carried through as an adult. It has for me, and baseball's a sport that I love, and I've talked about on the show before. But a lot of organizations, have had to really rethink the way that they actually bring people up into the major leagues. And so a lot of them have said, we've got to cultivate this skill, and we have to do a better job of bolstering up our farm system and growing from within, because that's what's going to lead to long-term success, instead of going out and just buying and cherry-picking talent and trying to bring them in and create, a culture of success and long-term winning. So, to me, I saw that same, really decision-making and thinking that an executive has to make. Am I in it for the long term, or am I only in it for a couple months?
There's no question about that. I am a huge sports fan, and I know that your listeners are coming in probably from around the country, and I'm sure a lot of them hate the New England Patriots. But I have to admit, I'm born and raised in Boston. Ever since I was a little kid, I'm a New England Patriots fan. And you have to admit, whether you like them or not, that's what the Patriots do. Think about all the top coaches who have left the Patriots and have gone elsewhere. And also, I don't know if you knew it, but that Bill Belichick and the Patriots have a very strong culture of promoting within. Like, you start out breaking down film, and then you're maybe a position coach, and then you're another position coach, and then before you know it, you're an assistant offensive coordinator, and then you're the offensive coordinator, and you're taught to stretch and act outside your comfort zone. And you're taught, people, that culture internally develops to be very strong. And yes, people leave. Thomas Dimitroff, who's the, general manager of the Atlanta Falcons, he left, that was a loss, but then the next guy in line comes up. And I think that's obviously you can see from the outcomes, it's a very, very strong sort of robust culture. So I think sports, there's some really good analogies.
Definitely. And, when I was looking at your book, you talk about there's really 5, very clear challenges that an organization has to be able to embrace and overcome, talking about humps. Tell us what those are.
Sure. Yeah. So I should say that just as a little bit of backdrop, I studied and was very interested in people stepping outside their comfort zone in all sorts of professions. So managers, doctors, police officers, actors, students, priests, rabbis, teachers, all sorts of people in all sorts of situations. Stepping outside your comfort zone when you're afraid of public speaking, afraid of networking, afraid of small talk, afraid of making sales, afraid of speaking up at a meeting. All sorts of things that many of us struggle with one way or another. So I found that it all boiled down to me when I did all this research to 5 different core challenges. They were authenticity, likability, and I can sort of give you a sense of what these are in a sec if you're interested. We had authenticity, likability, competence, resentment, and then morality. And would it be useful to kind of just dive into each one a little bit?
Most definitely.
Yeah. So think about it. You're stepping into a situation that you're not comfortable with. You need it to grow and to learn and develop in your job, but you're not comfortable with it. One of the biggest threats is authenticity. The idea that this is not me. I feel like an imposter. I feel like a poser. I feel like a wannabe, stepping up and giving a speech or speaking in front of a meeting or being assertive or whatever it is. And it just doesn't feel like me. That's the authenticity challenge. And I found that a lot. The second one is the competence challenge. The idea that, deep down you think to yourself, I'm not good at this. And by the way, there's like a public side of it too, which is they can see that I'm not good at this. And I know that they can see that. And so that's really uncomfortable to step into a situation like that, afraid you'll look like a fool giving a public speech or whatever it might be. So we got authenticity, we got competence, likability. That is a huge challenge for a lot of people stepping outside their comfort zone. So it's the idea that I'm afraid that people will hate this version of me. If I do this, if they won't respect it, they'll hate me if I'm more assertive than I typically am, or if I deliver bad news or whatever it might be. So those are the big 3: authenticity, competence, and likability. There are 2 others that I find from time to time too, which are resentment. Sometimes, when in Rome, act like the Romans. You need to act in a certain way in a certain context, but logically you do. But psychologically, sometimes people feel resentful about that. I can't tell you how many introverted employees I have spoken with over the past year who have said something like this to me. They've said something like, it frustrates me so much. I'm really good at my job. I do excellent work. I work hard, but it drives me insane that the people who are getting the promotions, the people who are getting the great opportunities, the ones who can make small talk and play golf and chit chat. That sort of, it's this social sort of extroverted element about the work context that's really giving them an edge when they feel that it really should be the quality of their work. So these folks, these introverted folks who feel very awkward in these situations, they're deeply resentful around stepping outside their comfort zone. And then the final one's morality. And you don't see this all the time, but sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone just feels wrong to do. I actually opened my book, Reach, with a story about a young entrepreneur who had to fire her best friend from her startup. So that's a good example of that. So you're not going to feel every one of these challenges, by the way. No one does. Well, very few people do in every situation, but even one of them can make stepping outside your comfort zone pretty tough.
I appreciate you sharing that. As you were talking, there was many things that was running through my head, and I started thinking about something that someone had brought up on a few episodes back, and they talked about the problems that people have with the issue of can't do versus won't do, and that a lot of times we turn our won't do's into can't do's. It's like we start saying, well, I don't feel comfortable like that, so therefore I can't do it. No, you're just choosing not to.
Yeah, and there's a real reason why people don't do those things, and it's because it's really uncomfortable for all the reasons that we just talked about, and so it's much easier to avoid. And I talk about in the book all the different ways that I imagine if our listeners are thinking sort of honestly to themselves, think about all the ways that you avoid things outside your comfort zone. And I enumerate a bunch of different ones in the book. By the way, I have to also say here, I I wrote a book about acting outside your comfort zone. I've done a lot of academic research on it. I've interviewed tons of people. I coach people. I give speeches and so on. But I struggle myself doing this too. It's not like I'm some perfect example of it, but I almost think that the fact that I struggle gives me insight into how other people struggle maybe too. So
I think that's a really good point. I mean, it's a little bit difficult to empathize if you didn't have, some of the same issues. And I think part of that awareness is really critical to all this, is to say, okay, are these really, can't do things or just won't do things because of all this fear factor and all these things that are required in order for me to get over that hump?
Yeah, and let's give people some tools, some concrete tools and insights and frameworks that they can use to approach it, because that might, change a won't do or can't do into a I'll try it type of situation, right?
So when you start talking about tools and you start talking about these 5 challenges, I mean, what is one tool that you see that's pretty common that would assist folks?
So I have 3 tools that I talk about, and I kind of boiled it down. I'm a super practical person, and I did all these interviews, and I've done a lot of coaching and training and so on. But I wanted to really boil it down for readers and listeners into sort of 3 super concrete tools. So the first one is what I call conviction. And I find time and time again, it is so critical to have a deep sense of conviction about why this is worth doing for you. Because if you think about it, you're kind of swimming upstream here. This is a situation that's outside your comfort zone. It's very easy to avoid. It's uncomfortable, probably for one of the reasons we talked about before. And so what you need is that wind at your back. You need that sort of that motivation, that drive, that sense of purpose to say yes when every bone in your body is saying, no, don't do this. And, that sense of conviction can come from a lot of places. For some people, it's a professional source of conviction. I'm afraid of public speaking. I am so scared of doing it. But you know what? I want to be a manager. I want to be a leader. I believe in something, and I believe that I want to, lead this business, lead this group, or whatever. And that's my professional goal. And yes, this task, this part of it is going to be hard, but because I want to achieve that goal, I'm willing to do this. That's an example of a professional source of conviction. Sometimes conviction's personal. And I have to tell you, to be quite honest, in my life, it's often personal. I have 2 kids, as you mentioned at the beginning, and I want to be a really good dad, and that's probably the most important thing to me of anything. If I'm trying to sort of coax my kids outside their comfort zones, and then I face a situation in my life and I'm scared and I'm tempted to avoid, I stop myself and I'm saying, wait a second, is that the kind of role model I want to be? And so that ends up being often a very strong source of conviction for me. My point though here is with conviction is find yours and embrace it and use it as a tool. So that's the first one. So the second tool, and I have to tell you, the second thing was probably the most surprising and almost like the most exciting aspect of my research, because I kept seeing it popping up time and time again. I finally named it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a really cool insight. I think that can help a lot of people. And the term I use for it is customization. Customization. It's the idea that there's no one size fits all way to do anything, any situation. You can customize, you can tweak it, you can put your own little personal spin on anything, really. And sometimes just doing that makes it that much more comfortable, that much more authentic, that much more sort of kind of easier to nudge yourself to do it. So by customizing and tweaking, I mean things like your body language. I mean things like props, literally like a prop. For years, I've spoken before about this, how I used to bring a lucky ring when I spoke, because I was afraid of public speaking for years. And that ring was actually a ring that my great uncle found in World War II. He was in the Navy on the South Pacific, in the beaches of the South Pacific. He didn't find the ring; he found the stone that he ultimately made into a ring. And he wore it for years, and I used to really be transfixed by it. It was a really cool stone, and then I learned the meaning of it, and it started to represent courage for me. And then eventually he ended up having dementia, and he didn't wear the ring anymore, and his wife gave it to me, and I started wearing it, especially when I was in a situation outside my comfort zone that I was scared of, and it always represented courage to me. Now, no one else in the room at the time obviously knew that, but to me, I knew that, and that's the way I tweaked it. That's the way I customized it, just by putting that little prop on my finger. It actually gave me a little boost. People sometimes can tweak their language, the script or language they use. Sometimes it's the context. I know a lot of people who are afraid of public speaking. I know we're using that example a lot, but it's a common one. A lot of people try to do Q&A sessions instead of sort of like a pat speech, because they're more comfortable with the Q&A. My point here is, however you do it, in whatever way, you have more power than you think to sort of put your own little tweak or spin on a situation. And in my book and my work, I sort of enumerate all sorts of ways people can do that, and I help them with it. So that's customization. The last thing I'll get to quickly here is clarity. So we've got conviction, customization, and clarity. Clarity, quite simply, is finding a way for you not to fall off what I call like the psychological balance beam. So in these situations outside our comfort zone, we're often like legitimately scared, right? We're legitimately uncomfortable, and our emotions can take hold. And when our emotions start speaking, they start bringing us to extremes. So public speaking again, since we've used that example before, I'm terrified of speaking in public. I know I am going to faint, and I am going to make an absolute fool of myself. I'm never doing this. That's what we call catastrophizing. That's a very extreme reaction. Now, you could have an extreme reaction on the other side, which people often do, which is, I will only give a speech if I'm like the best TED talker ever. The point about clarity is finding a middle ground, finding somewhere between those extremes. Don't let your emotions take hold. Use your rationality. Find a way in the middle to kind of ground yourself, to find a way to say something like, you know what? I probably won't faint. It probably won't be as bad as I think. The chances of it being in that awful situation are very, very small. It probably won't be unbelievable. It'll probably be okay. You know what? I might even surprise myself, and next time around, I'll probably learn something. I'll probably learn a whole lot, actually, and I'll do better. That's sort of a grounded, sort of clarity type of approach. And I found people who are most successful at stepping outside their comfort zone were able to sort of adopt that sense of clarity. So you got conviction, customization, and clarity.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, as you were talking, I started thinking about a lot of things, and I had read something about what the guy referred to as energy units, and that all of us, every single day, we have a certain amount of energy units to use throughout our day. And when they're gone, they're gone. And so if I start talking about pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, I'm burning energy units, man. And if it's really, way outside of my comfort zone, I'm just exhausting them really fast. But as you were talking about those particular tools, to me, I think that they were, ways in order to be able to preserve your energy or even give you energy in order to be able to go through the process or go over those humps, and get past those challenges.
That's a really good way of talking about it. I like that idea of energy. And, it actually brings me to another point, which I think is important, is, oftentimes when I give keynote speeches about stepping outside your comfort zone, someone inevitably asks me, do you always want to be stepping outside your comfort zone? Because if you look on Google, if you Google comfort zone, you're going to find little pictures and memes and images that say, if you're not outside your comfort zone, you're dead, or life only begins on the edge of your comfort zone, or, whatever it is. Comfort zones get a super bad rap on the internet. But, the reality, and I think this connects to your point about energy, is that there are certain points in time where it probably doesn't make sense for you to be stepping outside your comfort zone, right? We all have sort of I always like to think about it like a portfolio, like a 401k portfolio as a metaphor. We've got all sorts of situations in our lives, right? And it's probably wise, just like in your 401k, to have some diversification, right? You don't want to put all your energy eggs in one basket and go outside your comfort zone and every situation that you're possibly in. Unless you're like an adrenaline junkie, I think you will probably burn out and it will be very, very uncomfortable and difficult. I think you want to have a range of situations, some where you're actually smack dab in your comfort zone, certain parts of your life, certain situations. And then others, maybe you've decided that you want to stretch and that's where you want to dedicate that energy. But I think it's actually a strategic question about when and how it makes sense to step outside your comfort zone. So the internet's not quite right.
In a lot of ways, right? So I know when we start talking about all of this and you're talking about the energy units and all of that, we look towards quotes on the Fast Leader Show to kind of help us. Is there a quote that you can share that helps you?
I don't know if I have an exact favorite quote that I live by, a mantra, but there is something that I do think about, and I don't know who said it, to be honest, but there's something about like showing up every day. Like literally, like people often are transfixed with the idea of productivity. Like, how do I become more productive? And this isn't exactly about comfort zones, but this is something I think about a lot. And it's the idea that if you just show up every day, if you just put in an honest day's work, you don't have to rock the world every day, but if you put up an honest day's work, whatever you're doing, whatever your ambition is, whether you're building a company, whether you're writing a book, whether you're writing a blog, whether you're trying to reinvent yourself, you chip away at it every day. That compounding effect is really going to achieve results in the end. And I think a lot of people don't maybe they realize it, but they don't live by it. And that's certainly something that I try to live by.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, we've talked about, these things associated with reach and, talked about, your transition and how you've actually, gone through to become a professor. There's a lot of humps that are associated with that. Is there a story that you can share?
Yeah, sure. Oh my gosh, I have so many situations outside my comfort zone. I think a good one is probably learning to get over my fear and discomfort with social media and in self-promotion in particular. So in 2013, I published my first book, Global Dexterity, which essentially was written in 2011 or so. And at that time, I was not on any social media. I wasn't on LinkedIn. Maybe I had a very super basic profile, but not active in any way. I didn't have a Facebook account, nor did I have a Twitter account, nothing. And I very quickly realized after I published that book that you can't just press send on a book and everyone, reads it and enjoys it and benefits from it and finds out about you. Most importantly, you kind of have to be your own advocate. You have to get out there, and social media is I now know it's a great way of doing that. But at the time it was so uncomfortable to sort of cultivate this, public persona, which was really weird because I'm not really that public a person, to be honest, in general. But I've found my way of doing that. And then the biggest problem was really self-promotion, on social media. And when you're sort of spreading the word about something that you've done or accomplished, like a book, for example, there's a fine line, I feel, between sort of like overt self-promotion, which feels incredibly uncomfortable to me, and just sort of like honestly and earnestly spreading the word about something that you believe in. And I just had a hard time finding a way to do it that worked for me. And to some degree, I still struggle with it, but I feel much more comfortable doing it now. And in terms of conviction of what we talked about before, I know that I like really believe in the stuff that I do in my books, in Global Dexterity, and now in my book Reach. Like, I really believe it. I see how it benefits people, and so that motivates me despite the sort of like uncomfortable feelings I might have. So I think that's a good. There are many situations outside my comfort zone, but that's a pretty applicable one, I think.
Well, I mean, for me, as you were talking, and thanks for sharing that, as I started thinking about too the whole purpose component, right? Is that you realize the purpose component was about the opportunity and the way that others' lives can be impacted. And that if you don't do the self-promotion piece, how many people are you really going to impact or help? I mean, very little.
Absolutely. They're not going to find out about it. So I have a unique situation, which is cool. And I'm really grateful for, so I'm a professor at Brandeis University, and I've created an MBA class around the issues in my book Reach, about helping people step outside their comfort zone. It's almost been like a living laboratory, sort of a living laboratory to to sort of see people use the tools that I talk about, to go out there and try these things. And then in almost every single case, people have aha moments. They have new, fresh insight. They start to sort of see a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of stepping outside their comfort zone. So it's really exciting and almost like affirming in a sense. So that almost gives me sort of a double sense of conviction that, I through my book reach and now through the online classes that I'm creating, I know that this stuff can help people. And so, social media is a tool, I guess.
Well, and the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about an Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Andy, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Andy Molinsky, are you ready to hoe down?
I am.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Oh, you wanted fast questions, fast answers. Well, I think that that courage to be able to step outside my own comfort zone, basically to take my own advice in my book, in my trainings, and apply it to my own life. And I have definitely started to do that, but I could do that even more.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
The best leadership advice I have ever received was to know what your values are, know what you care about, and make those your North Star. In other words, the idea, North Star, is that if you're lost at sea, you can always find your way by looking at the North Star. That's your beacon. And it's the same thing with your values and beliefs. I think a lot of people can be sort of pushed or sort of like coaxed in various different directions. There's so many things coming at us, so many opportunities. But if you can sort of keep your values and beliefs at the center to guide you, I think that's your very best leadership advice, or at least that's the best advice I've got.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success? Well,
I'm pretty fast, like at writing, for example. I love writing, and I'm pretty fast at it. So I end up being fairly productive, and I think that that's probably one of my tricks, one of my secrets, that I just happen to be pretty fast.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
I like coffee. I have a small little dog that sits at my feet while I write, which is very nice. Tools. What other tools? Gosh, I don't know. I think that I happen to have made a switch from, I used to be a PC person for many, many, many years. And I still love PCs. My wife has a PC and so on. But I decided to start using a Mac a couple of years ago. And I have to tell you, there's something fun about using it. I have to say I'm like a little bit happier while I'm using the Mac. And I think that that's been like a little bit of a little minor boost in my work life. So I'm not advertising for Macs or for Apple, but I'm just telling you, for me, it's made me just a little bit happier.
What would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners that could be from any genre? Of course, we're going to put a link to Reach on our show notes page as well.
Book. Well, lots of books. I read a lot of business books. Gosh, what would be a great book? There's a great book about story by Robert McKee. I think that it's a really interesting book about sort of deconstructing and understanding stories, the stories we tell, the stories of our lives. Story is such a key element in our communication and the way that we sort of influence people, the way that we make sense of our lives. And that's sort of a classic book in the genre of, film and so on. And that's that's a book I certainly go to. Another book that I love is a book called Difficult Conversations. That's a book about how to have challenging conversations that matter. It's a very practical book. Frankly, it's a book that I kind of almost was inspired by while I was writing my books, because I wanted to try to write something, smart and super practical, just like they did. I'm in my office now, and when I look at the book, it almost looks like someone took a bite out of it. That's how many times I've read it. And I was actually super honored that the author of that book wrote a great endorsement of my own book, Reach. So I came full circle on that.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Andy Molinsky. Okay, Andy, this is my last hump day out on question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skill that you have now back with you, but you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
No question. The courage to try things that are new. That is absolutely what I would take from age whatever I am now to age 25. I think that I didn't try enough things. I didn't take enough chances. I think I ended up in a great place. I'm very happy where I am, but I think I maybe would have had an even more interesting circuitous path if I were able to step outside my comfort zone and to have that courage at a bit earlier time in my life.
Andy, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
I'm glad you asked, because I really love connecting with people. So, on all the typical ways, LinkedIn, despite what I said earlier, I am now super active on social media. LinkedIn is a great one. You can just connect with me, look me up there. Twitter, Facebook, and the very best way is my website, which is www.andymolinsky.com, which is spelled ANDYMOLINSKY.com, and special bonus points if you spell my name right.
Andy Molinsky, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.